Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's a Monday morning, November 14th of 2022. And we're starting off 11 a.m. and EST, Eastern Standard Time. And it's good to have everybody with us. Thank you for joining us, all assembled ears, as they say, and enjoy our reading. We're going to be finishing the text, I believe, today of this wonderful new history book, Who We Are, America's Fight for Universal Progress from Franklin to Kennedy, Volume 1, 1750s to 1850s. So Anton Chaitkin, whose scholarship is just tremendous, has offered us an alternative history to these various periods of time. The first volume, unfortunately, ends in 1850, and I really want to know what's going to happen next. So I hope he's scribbling away or typing away as we speak, because volume 2 is going to be even more exciting than this one, as we reveal some of the real forces that created America, and especially our economy, and how the intentions of Benjamin Franklin and his group of his junto, if you will, put together a program of progress for this country, but also for England and also for mankind generally. The real American spirit, in other words, is born with this idea of using our skills to develop our natural resources here in our own sovereign country. Well, we've made it to page 362. I've read most of the text of the book, actually. I just skipped a couple of parts of one chapter. We are now in the railroad era, and we just read last Monday about how anthracite coal production was the key, because Pennsylvania was just full of anthracite coal, but nobody could figure out how to safely burn it to produce the steam that would drive the trains, until these scientists got busy. And now we have an incredible increase from 400 tons in 1820 produced to 3.5 million tons in 1847. Also, there's the production of iron, the production of railways, the production of engines that could drive the trains, and the laying of track 6,000 miles by 1847. Now, the next section, the Pennsylvania Railroad, Henry Carey, and the fight for national survival. The Pennsylvania Railroad would be the world's largest railway and the center of power for those organizing the second phase of U.S. industrialization during and after the Civil War. The project began in a meeting of Philadelphia's commercial and political leaders on December 10, 1842. They appealed to the state legislature to charter a railroad to connect the city to Pittsburgh. They expected great prosperity to buoy the enterprise. The highly protective tariff had been enacted earlier that year, and Henry Clay's star was ascending. But Clay lost the 1844 presidential race to Tennessee's James K. Polk, a particularly cruel slave owner, a spokesman for the expansion of slavery, and a chief opponent of the Bank of the United States. By the time the Pennsylvania legislature incorporated the Pennsylvania Railroad, on April 13, 1846, the country was embroiled in Polk's crusade for a slave empire in preference to an industrial republic. Well, I just have to stop and take a breath and say, wow, that was a huge change of direction, you know, from Henry Clay to James K. Polk. I never knew anything about James K. Polk except for that he was just kind of this, not important president back in a time when presidents weren't all that important anyway. But now we see that he was important, just on a very, very negative side of the balance. an important man who was a drag against our progress and against the liberty that our Constitution promises. Well, what's all this have to do with the railroad? In May, Congress approved Polk's invasion of Mexico with a declaration of war. In July, the Free Trade 1846 tariff overturned the protective tariff of 1842. This caused an immediate drop in the price of iron. Very soon, even before the new tariff schedules went into effect, Philadelphia factories began to close down. Wages began falling, and workers left the coal regions. Boy, it sounds like Europe, doesn't it? I mean, Europe today. Private investors were unlikely to risk their capital in an uncertain long term venture without government support. The Philadelphia Select Council, the City Council, acted to keep the railroad project on course, authorizing the city's purchase of 1/4 of the PRR's stock. The municipal government would be represented on the corporate board of directors. The PRR, that is the Pennsylvania, was organized in 1847 in March with Samuel V. Merrick, Merrick, as president. He served simultaneously as president of the Franklin Institute, of which he was founder. The brilliant, hard-driving J. Edgar Thompson came in as chief engineer. Thompson chose for his principal assistant West Point graduate and former Army officer Herman Haupt, perhaps the country's leading expert on bridge construction. Thompson and Haupt together designed and built the PRR line across the Allegheny Mountains to Pittsburgh. The pair asserted increasing authority over the company. Thompson succeeded in ousting the founding directors and became PRR president in 1852. Haupt rose to chief engineer. Haupt reorganized the Pennsylvania Railroad's management to be like the U.S. military, as Whistler had done earlier with the Western Railroad of Massachusetts. Line officers ran the day-to-day railroad operations. Staff officers in a general transportation office concentrated on the company's broader strategic problems. The PRR under Thompson gained a unique reputation for excellent engineering, reliability of service, and the reinvestment of profits for improvement and growth. By the time the line was completed through to Pittsburgh in 1854, the continued existence of the United States was in question. Southern partisans and radical free traders dominated the federal government. They blocked economic development and threatened secession. In response, the Pennsylvania Railroad's mission changed from merely connecting Philadelphia to the West to making itself a crucial instrument for enhancing national technological and industrial power. The Pennsylvania Railroad became the linchpin for a Pennsylvania constellation of railroad companies, machinery producers, iron founders, and science establishments with a common nationalist political commitment. In this crisis era, Matthew Carey's son, Henry C. Carey, emerged as the preeminent spokesman for American economic nationalism. In his 1848 book, The Past, the Present, and the Future, Carey wrote that when Americans decide to protect themselves from imperialism, quote, their resistance will kill the colonial system and give freedom to India and Ireland, to the people of England, and to themselves, unquote. Wow. You know, that imperial system, it just doesn't go away, does it? Henry Carey showed that the British forced India out of manufacturing into growing opium for the British drugging and conquest of China, whilst their theorist Thomas Malthus blamed the resultant Indian starvation on overpopulation. Malthus made this lie the theoretical basis for a worldwide imperial system of crushing the poor. That theory dictates that poor people ought to die, since their very existence supposedly violates nature's stingy allocation of resources to mankind. Once again, this eugenics and overpopulation stuff is staring us in the face right now. And, our most important institutions are going right along with it, including the Catholic Church, including the nobility and the Freemasons and every organized group that's been around a while has somehow become part of it. And we have got to do something. It's not new, but the stranglehold is just getting tighter and tighter on us, you know, boiling frogs. We've got to recognize that they're turning up the heat. And it is the same empire. But Carey demonstrated that it was the imperial system that blocked human access to nature's greatest riches by preventing men from developing the productive forces that could bring ever new resources into use. Observers in upwardly aspiring countries such as Germany, Japan, and Russia saw the truth in Carey's viewpoint. Had not America just then found the means to mass produce iron using coal that had lain in the earth unused until then? Inventions, infrastructure, and protective tariffs had clearly created new resources and preserved an old resource, trees. Wow. Now they're cutting down trees for 5G. All over the world, the cities are losing their beautiful trees because they want to do this 5G. Empire. That's who it is. The empire. As the economic editor of the New York Tribune newspaper and in his books translated into many foreign languages, Henry Carey showed the world America's urgent task, its bold new national mission, trade policy, and well-directed credit must aid invention and build up unprecedented industrial capability everywhere. Then the U.S. and friendly foreign countries similarly advanced could all be permanently safe from imperial menace and strong enough to withstand internal insurrection sponsored by the imperial enemy. Makes sense to me. During the 1850s crisis of the American Union leading to the Civil War, Carey was a leading organizer of the new Republican Party. The party initially recruited on a single issue, opposition to the spread of slavery, without reference to economic philosophy. After the first Republican presidential candidate, John C. Fremont, lost the 1856 election, Carey increasingly assumed leadership of those demanding the party be redefined to represent the interests of the working population, those who had been impoverished by the slave owners' free trade policies. Through his Philadelphia base and through agents and contacts across the country, Carey directed a turn to Hamiltonian in economics that would persist as the underlying American strategy until the death of President John F. Kennedy a century later. As I read these words, I'd say, this is right. This is exactly what I have sensed, but it hasn't been put into text so clearly before. Carey's friends and devoted followers pushed for the 1860 nomination of Abraham Lincoln, who was himself a lifelong American system advocate and a reader of Carey's works. The 1860 Lincoln campaign in Pennsylvania, under Carey's strategy, was a mass movement of working people in the streets, demanding decent living conditions and national salvation. The electoral victory in Pennsylvania was the margin of victory in the national contest. Before his inauguration, Lincoln turned to Carey for advice on choosing his Treasury Secretary, and he took Carey's Philadelphia disciple William Elder for the tariff expert in the Treasury Department. For Treasury Secretary, Carey counseled Lincoln not to choose Simon Cameron, the protectionist senator from Pennsylvania, because Carey thought he was dishonest. Carey instead backed Salmon Chase, the anti-slavery senator from Ohio, who, though a free trader, would not be personally corrupt. All right. You can deal opium and slaves out there outside of the country, but don't be corrupt inside the country. No problem. Yeah. Well, this is reality. This is the way life has evolved. And, you know, somehow Carey decided that it would be okay to have one of these imperialists in the cabinet. I don't know why, but he trusted him. Carey then successfully directed national pressure for the adoption of a highly protective tariff as the permanent U.S. policy. It was only after this fundamental shift that the American steel industry came into existence, in a rush of industrial progress never before known to the world. In the Civil War, U.S. military strategy heavily depended on railroads to move troops and supplies. The Pennsylvania Railroad was in the center of Union planning, owing to its growing national scope, its technological superiority, and the intense patriotism of its leaders. President-elect Lincoln passed through Philadelphia and raised the flag over Independence Hall on the way to his 1861 inauguration in Washington, D.C. But Pennsylvania Railroad Operations Chief Thomas A. Scott advised Lincoln to change his plans. Intelligence reports showed that the Baltimore Sun was whipping up an anti-Lincoln mob, egging them on to a possible assassination when Lincoln's train was to pass through Baltimore. Scott proposed that Lincoln go back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and travel from there in disguise directly to Washington to arrive before the press knew what had happened. Lincoln followed this plan, and his inauguration was guarded by 15,000 soldiers and police. Well, this is not new, this need to call out soldiers and police to protect, ceremonies and events in our capital. The Pennsylvania Railroad was placed at the disposal of the Union. Lincoln chose Scott as Assistant Secretary of War in charge of transportation and communication. Scott brought his assistant Andrew Carnegie to Washington with him. Oh, Andrew Carnegie, hey? Their first job was to move troops to the defense of Washington through Maryland, where secessionist mobs had destroyed most of the rail lines. Carnegie was injured when replacing some sabotaged telegraph wires, and arrived on the first troop train into Washington with blood streaming down his face. Scott and Carnegie built the rail and telegraph lines and the bridges linking Washington, D.C. with Virginia, securing the capital and allowing Union troops to operate on the offensive southward. Carnegie organized the Union Telegraph Office, using mostly Pennsylvania Railroad personnel for operators. He then returned to Pittsburgh to direct the Western Pennsylvania war operations of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Thomas Scott remained as Assistant War Secretary into 1862 and continued running some of the crucial movements of Union troops later on. Former Pennsylvania Railroad Chief Engineer Herman Haupt was brought back into the Army to run all construction and operation of U.S. military railroads. Haupt's brilliance and fierce devotion frequently made Union victories possible. After the war, J. Edgar Thompson, Scott, Carnegie, and several other men, working as partners with pooled interests, planned the radical upgrade of American heavy industry. They would come into a violent showdown with Wall Street and London, as will be seen in Volume 2 of the present work. Well, you see what I mean? I see he's gone into the Civil War era in this book, just where he leaves us hanging is the showdown with Wall Street and London. And this is where I think my next reading is going to go. And that, of course, is this book here, A Law Unto Itself, Sullivan and Cromwell story, where William Nelson Cromwell takes up the cause of corporations and makes them basically immortal. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for being with me this morning. I don't have a buy you a coffee thing. I should get that, Jimmy. My Patreons have been a little down, and I actually spent more on books than I took in last month. So buy me a coffee seems to work for a lot of people. It's a good idea. Thank you. All of a sudden says 10 out of 32. Come on, man. Yeah, that means push the like button. If you guys hit the like button, then more people will see the show. It's simple as that. Besides, I know you like it, don't you? You like me. Be honest. Promethean science. Quote, the emanation of Franklin, unquote. Well, it's interesting. That's the next section on page 368. Much of the sensational technological progress of the 19th century America was associated with the work and ideals of a set of scientists organized from the nationalist policy-making base in Philadelphia. They fought for the right of Americans and all men to benefit materially and culturally from the highest science. The group went by the ironic name Lazzaroni, Italian slang for beggars. They also called themselves the Florentine Academy, invoking the image of the 15th century Italian Renaissance group that revived Plato's philosophy. Their chief was Alexander Dallas Bache, that's Bache, whom we have encountered as the research leader at the Franklin Institute in the 1830s. The Lazzaroni originated in a Bache troop to Europe on a national interest assignment from Nicholas Biddle. Remember, Nicholas Biddle is the president of the Bank of the U.S. Biddle was chairman of the board of a large fund bequeathed to the city of Pennsylvania by banker Stephen Girard to set up a school for poor orphans to be called Girard College. Bache was chosen to be the school's founding president, and in mid-1836, Biddle's panel commissioned Bache to tour Europe and study the finest educational methods. A confidential part of the young man's mission was to meet and coordinate efforts with the scientific elite of Europe. Bache's journey would intersect explosive political events relating to strategic science policy. Bache sailed to Europe in the autumn of 1836. While in Britain, he traveled together with a close associate, physicist Joseph Henry. The two men were involved in stunning new research in coordination with scientists whom Bache was scheduled to meet later in Germany. A brief summary of this research will provide the background needed to understand the profound showdown that would occur at Bache's German destination. Joseph Henry in Albany had been working on the revolutionary application of electricity after studying discoveries made by European experimenters on how the properties of electricity and magnetism were related to each other. Between 1830 and 1832, a half century before Thomas Edison would set up the world's first electric power station, Joseph Henry invented the world's first electric motor. It was a simple device, like a seesaw. Current from a battery passed through a coil of wire wrapped around an iron bar, magnetizing the iron. The bar was mounted on a fulcrum and rocked back and forth, alternately closing and breaking the circuit at each end of the bar. Henry perfected the electromagnet, making it capable of lifting a weight of 3,000 pounds. Henry's apparatus could transmit power over a long distance and induce a current in another coil. Henry applied these results to the invention of the first telegraph, quote, in which signals were transmitted by exciting an electromagnet at a distance, by which means bells were struck in succession capable of indicating letters of the alphabet, unquote. Alexander Dallas Bache helped publish and circulate Henry's work in Europe as well as in America. In Philadelphia in 1830, Bache had made experiments in the observation of the Earth's magnetism. The work was carried out as faithfully as possible on the model of two German scientists, mathematician astronomer Carl Friedrich Gauss and physicist Wilhelm Eduard Weber. It was these two men in particular whom Bache was traveling to meet on his 1837 trip. Back in 1833, Gauss and Weber, working at Göttingen University in Hanover, notice Hanover, Hanoverian, hello, had excitedly taken up the leads provided by Henry's experiments. Gauss was then certainly the world's leading scientist and is today acknowledged as the founder of modern mathematics. Wilhelm Weber, his working partner, quote, discovered that conducting wires of an electric telegraph could be left without insulation except at the points of support, unquote. Gauss arranged, quote, the application of a dual sign in such manner as to produce a true alphabet for telegraphy, excuse me. Weber and Gauss then built and publicly demonstrated the first long-distance telegraph with wires stretched 1 mile over houses. Gauss wrote in 1835 that with a developed electric telegraph, Russia's Tsar Nicholas could transmit orders instantly, even out to Siberia. Wow. Wouldn't you, if you were the Tsar, wouldn't you love that? Just push a button and everybody does what you say. Sounds like something the Empire would like. Pardon me. It was proposed that the railroad initiated by Friedrich List in Germany should install the Weber-Gauss telegraph along the line. They wrote memoranda to the directors of the Leipzig-Dresden Railroad and negotiations commenced. While Bache was on his way to finally meet these colleagues, the British brutally intervened in Hanover, the German state ruled by the British royal family, and against Hanover's Göttingen University. In June 1837, a new Hanoverian king was enthroned, Ernst August, the fifth son of England's King George III. On November the 1st, Ernst August revoked the relatively mild constitution that his brother had granted to Hanover's restless population. Citizenship was thus replaced by subjection. 7 prestigious Göttingen professors quickly signed a courageous petition protesting against Britain's destruction of Hanover's liberty. Gauss's partner, Wilhelm Weber, Gauss's son-in-law, theologian Heinrich Ewald, the fairy tale telling brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, and 3 other teachers. Students disseminated the petition throughout Germany. On December 12, 1837, the professors, suddenly famous as the Göttingen Seven, wow, the Chicago Seven, the Göttingen Seven, were expelled from the university. 3 of them were ordered into exile. King Ernst August sent troops to surround the university to prevent demonstrations. In January 1838, Alexander Dallas Bache arrived in Göttingen, now under the British terror. Bache met with Karl Gauss and the expelled Wilhelm Weber, and it is known that they discussed the progress of electrical science and the telegraph, among other topics. Bache's great-grandfather, Franklin, had also visited Göttingen University in triumph after his confrontation in Parliament over the Stamp Act, and Bache himself had high status among European thinkers. He had an excited reception in Germany. Quote, an elderly savant, on being introduced, clasped him in his arms, saluted him with a kiss on either cheek, and said, Mein Gott, now let me die, since I have lived to see with my own eyes an emanation of the great Franklin. Unquote. The British crackdown crushed the active experimental collaboration of Gauss and Weber. As King Ernst August told Alexander von Humboldt, quote, for my money, I can have as many ballet dancers, whores, and professors as I want, unquote. But Gauss, Weber, Humboldt, and Bache proceeded to extend the, quote, magnetic union, unquote, in German Magnetische Verein, which Gauss and Weber had organized into a worldwide string of observatories to study the Earth's magnetic field. They recruited to it a global network of scientists and statesmen committed to human progress. This Renaissance brotherhood formed the backbone of Bache's work for the rest of his life. On his return to America, a country beset by Southern separatists and Anglo-American agents, Bache recruited a handful of scientific associates, of undoubted loyalty, patriotism, and genius into his small junto. With strong working ties to Gauss, Humboldt, and their European co-thinkers, the Lazzaroni created a rigorous new standard of creativity and success in the military, in science, and in industry in order to guarantee the defense of the Republic. America's powerful navy and her steel and electrical industries were among the direct accomplishments of the Lazzaroni and their closest allies over the next 40 years. Participating in the Magnetische Verein, Bache resumed his observations at Philadelphia's Girard College. In 1840, he hired an assistant, Philadelphian William Chauvenet, a recent Yale graduate and accomplished classical pianist. Bache and Chauvenet would soon bring about the founding of a National Academy for the Navy, parallel to West Point for the Army. Bache, meanwhile, reorganized the Philadelphia public schools, taking guidance particularly from the Prussian schools that he had closely studied. Philadelphia appointed Bache to be principal of Central High School, and Bache built it into the first great public secondary school in America, the model for others. Bache established at Central High the nation's best-equipped astronomical observatory. Central High's astronomer, Sears Walker, quickly taught Bache's assistant, William Chauvenet, the most advanced methods of the German astronomers. In 1842, Commodore James Biddle, brother of Nicholas Biddle, made Chauvenet head of a school that had been informally established within the Philadelphia Naval Asylum, the elderly seamen's home, under Commodore Biddle's command. With Bache's help, the 22-year-old Chauvenet put old and young sailors through sophisticated courses in geometry, astronomy, and other navigational sciences. In 1843, Bache was appointed head of the United States Coast Survey. He made the survey into a school for geodesy and hydrography for the entire military establishment, and into the powerful base through which the federal government recruited and trained scientists. Interesting, isn't it? That's the beginning of the federal government recruiting and training scientists. The work on oceanography under Bache, continuing the field developed by Humboldt and Franklin, and mapping of the entire coastline would allow the Union to impose an effective blockade on the South during the Civil War. Also in 1843, the U.S. Congress financed the implementation of Samuel F.B. Morse's telegraph. Bache and Sears Walker then developed the method of longitude computation by telegraph. I never knew about that. Makes sense, though, if you can get your sightings and then telegraph them, hundreds of miles away. Yeah, interesting. In 1845, Bache and his allies prevailed on the government to move William Chauvenet's naval school from the Philadelphia Asylum to the Army's Fort Severn in Annapolis, Maryland. The project took an immediate wrong turn when Navy Secretary George Bancroft appointed Anglophile Captain Franklin Buchanan to be the school's superintendent. Buchanan later joined the Confederacy in the Civil War. But William Chauvenet continued in charge of the school's instruction and overall organization. He taught astronomy, navigation, geometry, and other mathematics. He and the nationalist Commodore Matthew Perry were the school's principal overseers. Before long, the name was changed to the United States Naval Academy. The Smithsonian Institution was founded in 1846, due principally to John Quincy Adams's fight for it. On Bache's recommendation, physicist Joseph Henry was appointed Smithsonian chief. Henry created the modern Weather Service, based on reception of reports by telegraph. Meanwhile, Lazzaronian Benjamin Pierce founded the Harvard Observatory and Harvard's Lawrence Scientific School. Yale's Sheffield Scientific School was created by Lazzaroni member Oliver Wolcott Gibbs and Bache's ally, the chemist Benjamin Silliman, Jr., who had first publicized the electrical work of Joseph Henry. Bache was the recognized chief of America's scientists during the Civil War. With his Lazzaroni at the center of military strategy and intelligence, President Lincoln often consulted with Joseph Henry and enjoyed rolling up his sleeves to help Henry at his experiments. Bache was the first president of the National Academy of Sciences, which he and his chosen candidates established in 1863 to ensure an enduring pro Union institutional base. At the outbreak of the war, President Lincoln asked four men to sort out the loyalties of the Naval Officer Corps: Alexander Dallas Bache, Lazzaronian Admiral Charles H. Davis, who had translated from Latin into English Carl Gauss's theory of the motion of the heavenly bodies revolving around the sun in conic sections, Admiral Samuel F. DuPont, close collaborator of Bache and Davis, and Commodore Hiram Paulding, son of the revolutionary patriot who captured British master spy Major André. These men later swung the decision to produce the new Monitor, ironclad warship. In 1855, Benjamin Silliman Jr. went to western Pennsylvania to analyze petroleum found there and to advise investors inquiring into its potential use. Silliman reported that fractional distillation could render the then useless ooze valuable as a fuel and lubricant. Silliman's report became instantly famous, circulating everywhere, setting off a frenzy of expectations. Drillers rushed into Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Railroad organized a vast array of tank cars for trains and tanker ships on the Great Lakes to move independently produced petroleum to refineries. Silliman's report and the Philadelphia Partnership of Nationalist Industrialists thus created America's oil industry. The PRR, the Pennsylvania Railroad, continued developing this new industry until the 1870s, when the monopolist John D. Rockefeller crushed and swallowed up independent producers. Rockefeller and his London and Wall Street allies made war on the Philadelphia leadership, largely breaking their political power and bankrupting many enterprises. One of their last great projects was the financial sponsorship of the career of inventor Thomas Edison by William J. Palmer, protege and partner of Pennsylvania Railroad President J. Edgar Thomson. The advice to Edison that he should invent an electric light was given to him in 1879 by Edison's science advisor, Franklin Institute Research Director George Barker. These adventures will be presented in Volume 2 of Who We Are, covering America's progress from Lincoln to the death of Kennedy in 1963. A few years after Alexander Dallas Bache returned from Europe, he spoke at the Franklin Institute about the unique character of industrial America. It was a new civilization, bypassing the mere trading centers such as the formerly powerful Venice, whose wealth had been, quote, lavished to decorate the homes of the merchant nobles. Bache, quote, best discussed, quote, the means employed in different countries for the promotion of manufacturing and the mechanical arts, and of the intellectual improvement of their cultivators. He lauded the great scheme of the Zollverein, within which the Prussian state encouraged manufacturing and foundries. The Zollverein is the tax union, the excise tax union in Germany that was, the beginning of the German unification. Promoted into inventions and trained the young without cost as machinists, metal founders, architects, builders, and engineers. He contrasted to that generous policy Britain's closed, quote, competitive society, which fearfully barred all significant public interchange of technology. Bache spoke bluntly of America's most powerful advantage over the old world. Quote, the low wages of operatives generally in Europe, low relatively to the prices of conveniences, tends to keep the mass of them from intellectual improvement. Their youth is past before they can judge of the necessity for culture, and later adult responsibilities press on them so heavily that they have time to think of little else. Until the means of life are more uniformly distributed, the mass of the mechanical population of Europe cannot become intellectual. The advantages of a different system of things which exists with us, we should never lose sight of, never let go. Well, I think that's a powerful ending to the reading of this book. There is an appendix, Shelburne, Baring, and Imperial Intelligence. Um, I think I will skip it, and also an appendix on the Richmond Junto, Richmond, Virginia, that is, and the Washington Irving Circle and the West Point Foundry. So I'm going to leave it there. The advantages of a different system of things which exists with us, we should never lose sight of, never let go. Well, isn't that what we're doing right now? We've made, after World War II, the promise of wealth and conveniences and technological improvement was subsumed under the rat race. You know, my father was in the rat race, and most people's fathers were in the rat race. The mothers had too much to do. They were, despite the conveniences of a washing machine or an iron that's electric, all of this stuff just tends to not cut down on labor, but somehow make it even more time consuming. Perhaps the idea of being a super mom was pushed on the women. You have to vacuum the carpet every day and, you know, make sure that your husband has, that nice smile, that you greet him with that nice smile when he comes home from his laborious work. But that model really turned us into those people that Bache is saying, those are the European model. That's what they do. They wear people down so that they can't think. You come home so tired, you cannot consider the idea of, is there a better way? So while we lost it, and clearly by the time John D. Rockefeller takes over all the railroads and the oil industry, we've totally lost it. He's just part of the empire. But we still have it in our dreams, in our hearts, and in the minds of our, you know, bushy-tailed kids that go out into the world seeking a career, thinking, I can make it on my own intellect and my character and my willingness to work hard. But somehow you just get swept up into the rat race, and you can't do anything except for do your daily grind every day. That's what we don't want to be. That's what this crazy government has made us into since World War II. And the fact, that women are now out there in the rat race too just makes it worse. There shouldn't be a rat race. There should be voluntary communication, voluntary cooperation, producing things efficiently together. Keep your politics local. Don't let everything be decided by a central government or Washington or London. Well, this is Anton Chaitkin's gift to us, the view of a positive future, a way to look at the founding fathers in a really a loving way, that these people were really making a lot of progress for human freedom. And as much as people like to, you know, snipe at the American Constitution and our government, this is new, this is unique, and we cannot let it go. All right, you guys. Have a great day. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Not tomorrow morning, but tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the Protecting the Nest trio, our three good friends from around the country, and we'll talk about their view of what's going on. Have a great day.